The night shift isn't just a job, it's a different dimension. When you work in a corporate office park at 3 a.m., the world outside ceases to exist. There are no cars on the road, no birds in the trees, just the hum of the HVAC system and the flickering of fluorescent lights that seem a little too bright for an empty building. I worked security for a tech firm, basically a glorified hallway walker. My job was to make sure the server rooms stayed cool and the doors stayed locked. It was easy money until it wasn't. It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting at the main desk, staring at the grid of 16 security monitors. Everything was grayscale and still. Then the light for hallway 4B, a dead-end corridor leading to a storage closet, blinked on. These lights are motion activated. I zoomed in on the camera. Nothing. Just an empty hallway. I figured it was a moth or a glitch in the sensor. 10 minutes later, the printer in the HR office, which I had just walked past, began to whir. I heard the mechanical click-clack of a paper jam through the thin walls. I went to check it. The room was dark. The printer was spitting out blank pages. Every single one had a tiny hand-drawn X in the bottom right corner. My heart did a slow roll in my chest. I cleared the jam and turned the machine off at the wall. I walked back to the front desk. We have a physical visitor log, one of those old-school leather-bound books. It's a backup for the digital system. I don't know why I looked at it, but I did. The last entry was from 2:14 a.m. Name, my own name. Purpose of visit, to see the guest. Timeout, blank. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't touched that book since I signed in at 10 p.m. The handwriting was mine. Not a close enough forgery, it was my exact messy scrawl. I grabbed my radio to call my supervisor, but all that came out was static. Through the static, I heard a faint, rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from under the desk. I leaned over, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The knee hole of the desk was empty, but there, taped to the underside of the mahogany wood, was a small battery-operated speaker. It was playing a recording. It was the sound of me breathing. Then I heard a soft click from the hallway behind me. The sound of a door being unlocked from the inside. I didn't look back. I ran for the exit, and I didn't stop until I hit the streetlights of the main road. I never went back for my last paycheck, because when I checked the digital logs from home the next day, the cameras showed me sitting at the desk, but there was a second figure, thin, tall, and wearing my exact uniform, standing directly behind my chair for 3 hours. I never felt a thing. I'm a photographer. I like the dead season, late autumn moving into winter. I rented a small cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to get some shots of the Milky Way. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors for 5 miles, just me and the pines. The first 2 nights were perfect. But on the third night, the woods went silent. Not quiet, silent. Like the forest was holding its breath. I was sitting on the porch at midnight, waiting for a long exposure shot to finish. About 100 yards into the tree line, I saw it. A tiny pinprick of red light. I thought maybe it was a trail camera or a drone, but it didn't move. It was eye level, perfectly steady. I grabbed my binoculars. Through the glass, the red light became clear. It was the record light on a high-end camcorder, and whoever was holding it was standing behind a thick oak tree, perfectly camouflaged. I went inside, locked the deadbolt, and pulled the curtains. I felt like a fool. It's just a local hunter, I told myself. But hunters don't film people through cabin windows at midnight. I tried to sleep, but every time I drifted off, I heard a tap, 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 on the glass, on the siding. It was light like a fingernail. I looked at my laptop to edit the photos I'd taken earlier that day. I scrolled through the shots of the trees and the stars. Then I hit a photo I didn't remember taking. It was a shot of me sleeping on the couch, taken from inside the cabin. The timestamp was 3:15 a.m., the night before. The person wasn't outside. They were already in here. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I slowly reached for my car keys on the coffee table. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would crack a rib. I made a break for it. I burst out the front door, scrambled into my truck, and jammed it into reverse. As I sped down the gravel driveway, my headlights swept across the porch. The front door of the cabin, which I had locked and bolted, was standing wide open. I drove for 20 minutes before I dared to look in the rear view mirror. Deep in the back of my truck bed, tucked under the cargo net, that tiny red light was glowing. They hadn't stayed at the cabin. They had climbed into the back of my truck while I was starting the engine. I didn't stop until I found a police station. When they searched the truck, the bed was empty. All they found was a small camcorder tripod and a single Polaroid of me driving, taken through the back window of the cab while I was on the highway. I've lived in the same apartment for 3 years. The walls are paper thin. You get used to the soundtrack of your neighbors. The guy in 3B, Mark, has a routine. He gets home at 6 o'clock, watches the news, and at exactly 2:15 a.m., he gets up to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps across my ceiling. It's comforting in a way. It means I'm not the only one awake in the dead of night. Last Thursday, the routine changed. At 2:15 a.m., I heard the footsteps, but they didn't go to the kitchen. They walked to the spot directly above my bed and stopped. I lay there staring at the ceiling. I expected to hear him walk back. He didn't. For an hour, there was just wait. I could almost hear the floorboards groaning under the pressure of someone standing perfectly still. I eventually fell into a fitful sleep. The next night it happened again. 2:15 a.m. The footsteps walk to the center of the room and they stop. This time I heard a faint metallic sound, like a coin being dropped on hardwood. The next morning I saw Mark in the hallway. He was carrying a suitcase. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay upstairs? Heard you moving around late." Mark looked at me, confused. "Oh, I've been staying at my girlfriend's place since Monday. Just came back to grab some clothes for my trip to Chicago." "Why?" My stomach dropped. "You haven't been there all week?" "Nope," he said, hopping into the elevator. "Place has been empty as a tomb." That night I didn't go to sleep. I sat in my kitchen with a steak knife and the lights off. 2:15 a.m. came. The footsteps started. Thump, thump, thump. They walked to the spot above my bed. Then I heard something new, a scratching sound, like someone was unscrewing something. I looked at the vent in my ceiling. The grate was slowly, silently rotating. A pair of eyes, pale and wide, peered through the slats. They weren't looking around the room. They were looking directly at the spot on the bed where my head usually rests. I called 911. When the police kicked in Mark's door, they found the apartment staged. Someone had been living in the crawl space between our floors. They found a sleeping bag, a pair of binoculars, and a collection of my discarded mail. The person was gone, but they left a note on Mark's kitchen table. It just said, "You changed your routine." I like the old one better. The night is a strange thing. When the sun is up, we feel in control. We trust our locks, our neighbors, and our own eyes. But as the clock ticks past midnight, that control begins to slip. The stories you heard tonight aren't just tales of the dark. They are reminders that the thin veil of normalcy we live in can be torn away at any moment by a stranger in a truck bed, a presence behind an office door, or someone watching you through the very vents that breathe air into your room. We often fear the things we can't see, but perhaps we should be more afraid of the things we can see if only we looked a little closer. If you're lying in the dark right now, listening to this, take a second. Listen to the house around you. Is that the floor settling? Or is it a routine you haven't noticed yet? Thank you for joining me in the dead of night. If you've had an encounter that left you cold, an experience that you can't explain but will never forget, send it to us. Your story might just be the next echo in the dark. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe and turn on the bell. It helps keep the lights on. Though tonight, maybe you prefer to keep them off. Sleep well, if you can.